If you would please turn over in your songbooks to song number 456. Please mark that song as a song of encouragement for after our lesson this morning. 456. We'll sing the first and last verse as our song of encouragement after the lesson. I've told most of you I've been in a rather unique Bible study of sorts with a Reformed Presbyterian over Facebook who is an avowed compatibilist, as he has told me. I could define that word for you and tell you what it means according to the internet, but since it is a word associated with the study of philosophy and deals with logical inconsistency, most of us would probably not get a whole lot out of the definition. I mention this just to say that the study has been one that has been quite challenging in some ways. Not that I've had any issues meeting what few arguments he has made, but challenging in that I do not feel that I have made very much headway in my intended purpose of actually just having a simple Bible study. As I've mentioned during my previous lessons, this study concerns the false doctrine of Calvinism, and we began our study with that of total depravity. I would say from our replies back and forth at the present time, the majority of my students' problems lie in simply misunderstanding commonly used words in the Bible and their biblical definition. As an example of this, I mentioned during our last lesson the need to use proper tools for any Bible study. That would naturally mean using Bible dictionaries in order to define Bible words, not using creeds and confessions of men to do that, but using Bible dictionaries that are agreed on by most all religious scholars concerning Bible words. And that would naturally mean using Bible dictionaries in order to define these words and use these words in their proper context, not simply replacing them with definitions of our own or definitions from other books written by men, but men who have actually studied these languages and know what these words mean in the original language. That actually was the whole purpose for me interjecting the lesson that I did this past Sunday into my lineup of lessons in order for me to continue to talk about the study that I'm having with this young man over the internet. I mentioned in an earlier lesson that my student even had his own personal definition of the phrase total depravity as compared to what those individual words mean. The word total, he said, doesn't mean the same as utter. But the word utter, like in utter depravity and total depravity, are actually words that are synonymous. But he says they don't mean the same, not according to the way he defines them. And so I know that he is defining them using his own definitions and not definitions that we would find in a dictionary, which tells us they mean actually the same thing. So all of us know when you are having a Bible study, it is the utmost importance to use a sound and reputable Bible dictionary. The obvious reason for this is because the Bible was not written in our modern day English. It was translated from its original languages, in which it was written thousands of years ago, into the English language. And it was done so by mere men who tried to do their best, in most cases I would say, to use an English word that existed at the time that they were translating that best conveyed the true meaning of the original word that they were translating from the Hebrew and the Greek. All of us understand that certain words do change meaning over time and some do not. But as it regards the true meaning of Bible words and phrases, we must use a Bible dictionary in order to know the truest meaning of the words that we are reading. Most of which, as we've noticed before, would need no definitions at all for anyone who could read and understand at least from a 5th to 8th grade reading level. We have been told by such a man as James Watkins, who has studied this and knows that this is about what the Bible uses in English language as words that are on the 5th to 8th grade reading level. We all know that the phrase total depravity does not appear in the Bible, but was in fact an invented phrase from the minds of mere men, so it's not God-breathed as the rest of the Bible is. However, some men believe they are smarter than our God, who is said to be omniscient, meaning that He is all-knowing. And they can tell us what He meant to say instead of what He really said. This, of course, is what some men attempted to do as it regarded the false doctrine of total depravity sometime during the 1600s and the Westminster Confession, according to my Bible student. This being so, my student gave me his own definition of that definition, which really is not even in keeping, as I said, with the view of total depravity by many other people that I have read after and studied after in times past, who also believe this false doctrine. And it still is not in keeping with the meaning of those two words, total and depravity, as the Merriam-Webster's dictionary gives the meaning for those words. So it makes having a study with such a person as this pretty difficult when he gives his own definitions for words, and he just makes them up, really, I guess, as he goes along, or either he's reading them out of a book or something where somebody has done the same, instead of using dictionaries that we would all agree on in a religious setting. Another particular word that my student has been misusing due to his own definition, and not a proper biblical definition, I would say, is the word imputation. And that is a word I want us to look at closer today, the word imputation. The word imputation does not appear in the Bible, but the word impute, imputed, and imputeth does. There's 3 different forms of the word that occurs in the King James Version Bible. And when my student uses the word, it means something that the Calvinistic God forces on someone else against their choosing. That's what he means when he uses the word imputed or imputed. It means God is going to force something on someone. And whenever we look at the Calvinistic doctrine of original sin and total depravity, we know that what they are talking about forcing on someone is the guilt of Adam's sin, which they say has been imputed to all mankind. The guilt of Adam's sin was imputed to all mankind, which means it was against mankind's choice. It was just forced upon him. And then in regard to that, they say that Jesus' righteousness has to be forced upon mankind. But instead of it being forced upon all mankind, like sin is, it is only forced upon certain ones that Jesus or God chooses to pre-select or predestinate, as their other aspects of their doctrine of Calvinism teaches. I know how other Calvinists have tried to explain imputed righteousness and imputed sin in times past, because I've studied the doctrine for years, but each time you hear one of these people try to explain how this happens, each of them seems to have their own definition of how that sin got transferred to other people. I have asked my Bible student to explain to me how he thinks it happened, and he has yet to tell me how it happens. I've heard some men say it happens through the DNA of individuals, that Adam's DNA was actually modified whenever he committed sin, that it corrupted his DNA, and of course that was something that through inheritance through the rest of his progeny, the people, his descendants, that he and Eve would have, they would inherit that corrupted nature. And that seems to me to be probably one of the most logical type things If you wanted to try to argue through a logical sense, that could have been the case. The only problem is, I see with that, is that it doesn't seem like it's logical that sin could actually corrupt the DNA of a human being. And there's nothing in the Bible that tells me that that can happen. DNA is something that is built into the human being by God Himself and the creation of the first man, and continues on through the creation of every other man. There is nothing in the Bible that tells me that that DNA could have been corrupted or affected by an outward action of any other individual. But my friend, so far my student, has not argued from this line of reasoning, so I cannot use any kind of arguments to that effect whenever I'm having my study with him. I just have to basically go reply by reply and reply to what he has said and ask him questions and hope that he eventually gets around to telling me how this sin supposedly got transferred from Adam to every living creature. But whenever we look at the Bible's subject of imputation and what this means, to a Calvinist, we know that the Calvinists really have made up their own definition to this. It's not that the Bible teaches this, that this is what imputation really means, that God forces this on somebody else, that He forces the sin on somebody, or He forces Christ's righteousness on anybody else through imputation. Imputation, according to the Calvinists, is something that they have came up with on their own and written into their confessions and their creeds and the different things that our Bible study student is using in this. And my Bible study student went on to say that he did not believe there was any difference in using creeds and confessions compared to us just having a simple Bible study. And we'll talk about that more later. But as we can probably see, and we probably all know, creeds and confessions would have no place in this world if it wasn't for the fact that people were using them to teach a particular doctrine. And all of these doctrines, of course, in the different books, contradict one another. And so this is something that we need to study and need to have a better understanding of when it comes to the word imputation. So when we first read of the word impute, or forms of the word like imputed or imputeth in the King James Version, it is in the Old Testament. And the majority of the times these words are from the same Hebrew word, kashab, which is defined by Strong's Hebrew and Greek Dictionary as meaning to make account, as that of a bookkeeping expression. My wife Shannon worked at a bank in nearby Cherokee County for a period of about 10 years or more after we were married, and she worked in bookkeeping and also as a teller. And she knows what it means to impute or to make to somebody's account something. And it is not a one-sided affair, and anything having to do with a lack of choices by anyone involved in the transaction. Whenever she worked at the bank, of course, she knew that she was going to be one side of the transaction as a representative for the bank, and that whoever was trying to make a deposit to their account, she was going to have to be the one that they were dealing with. They would do something, make choices, and of course she would make choices in regard or in representative to the bank. And so it wasn't something that somebody just pulled up and forced their imputation upon the bank. Nobody could just drive up and simply force you to take the money and put it in their account. You had to have proper account numbers. You had to have the proper information for what account. And you had to have an account with that bank. And then you had to have somebody representing that bank who could pull up all that information in order for that transaction to take place. No forcing took place in that transaction. Imputation does not involve forcing someone to do something. It's a word that is a matter of choice. It is the making or taking of account or putting on the account of someone something that they have done or due to something they have done, based upon choices these people have made. Most all of us know if we want our paycheck imputed to our account at the bank, we must first of all work to earn a paycheck. We must have an employer who chooses to pay us for that work. And then we must have a bank who is willing to deposit that check to an account that they were willing to set up based upon our information that we provided them. And then they have to call up that information on that account for us to give them that paycheck and it be deposited to our account or imputed to our account. Should any of the steps in this process not be met, well, good luck writing a check on your account, because your money didn't get imputed to your account. If there's anything in this process, either in the process of your employer making a check to you that might be faulty or not having the money to honor his paycheck that he paid you, that's going to cause a problem. If you went and you gave wrong information when you went to deposit that check to your account, it's not going to be in the account you expect it to be in, if it's in any account at all. If something that the teller did in making her choices to put that information on your account and credit that to your account, it's going to have problems being there whenever you get ready to use it. And if something goes wrong between the bank and the Federal Reserve, you're going to have problems having the money in your account to draw off of. It's not going to be imputed to your account. There's going to be issues. And so there's a whole series of choices in which people have to make in this type of terminology. It is based upon choices through in and throughout the whole process. It is not something that happens through forcing. And we can even see this in the Old Testament usage of the word. Whenever we look at the word that is translated as this word in the Old Testament, we also notice another word that is translated as the same, but it basically means the same thing. It is the Hebrew word sasium. And we see that word used in 1 Samuel 22, verse 15. But as I said, it basically means the same thing as to charge to one's account. In fact, that's what Strong says it means. And of course, those choices are included in the act of imputation in the Old Testament, and we can see that in that exact verse. Because in 1 Samuel 22:15, this is how it reads. It says, "Did I then begin to inquire of God for him? Be it far from me. Let not the king impute anything unto his servant, nor to all the house of my father. For thy servant knew nothing of all this, less or more." In other words, what he's saying is, do not lay this to my account, what someone else did, because I didn't know anything about it. That is simply what that word impute means there. There are some choices being made there. Somebody else did something. And the king is being asked not to impute that to someone else's account. In other words, it wouldn't be fair if he imputed what someone else did to the blame or to the account of someone else in this particular verse here. We see another instance of this word in 2 Samuel 19:19, where it said, "And said unto the king, Let not my lord impute iniquity unto me. Neither do thou remember that which thy servant did perversely the day that my lord the king went out of Jerusalem, that the king should take it to his heart." So in asking for the mercy from the king for something he had actually done, this person begs the king to not hold him responsible for what he has done. Do not lay blame for this on my account and punish me for it. In other words, he is asking for mercy for something that he has done, a choice that he has made that he now realizes that he shouldn't made. And the king, of course, is going to have to make a decision on that. He's going to have to make a choice, have a choice to make. He is not being told to do something by force, and neither is it being forced upon somebody else. We see this also in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 18, where we read, "And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of this peace offering be eaten at all on the third day, it shall not be accepted, neither shall it be imputed unto him that offereth it. It shall be an abomination, and the soul that eateth of it shall bear the iniquity." In other words, if the commandment regarding the peace offering was not kept exactly as it was instructed, those who obeyed would not get credit for keeping the commandment of God in this case, concerning the peace offering. They would not get credit for this to their account of being obedient to the law, because they had done something that the law told them not to do. A similar thing to this is mentioned in Leviticus 17, verse 4. "And bringeth it not unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer an offering unto the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord. Blood shall be imputed unto that man. He hath shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among the people." Now all of us can look at these verses and see that choices are being made that results in the imputation, can't we? It's simple to see even in this verse here, where it says that he is to bring it not unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord. Blood shall be imputed to that man. He hath shed blood. In other words, the man had done something. He had made a choice to shed blood. And that man shall be cut off from among the people. Even if he went and offered an offering for the sin that he had committed in this case, it said that the man had shed innocent blood, and it would not be accepted. It would not be imputed to him. And so, or it says basically in this verse that the blood that he shed would be imputed to him. In other words, he'd be held accountable for that blood. And the blood that he was offering in the sacrifice would not be imputed to him. It would do him no good, because he was offering for something that he had no right to offer for. And then in Psalm 32, we see a verse here that is repeated in the New Testament. And interestingly so, it is something that we will look at in just a few minutes in the New Testament that is very misused by those whom we have been discussing, some Calvinists that we often have to talk to about these subjects as a New Testament doctrine. But it actually has its beginning in the Old Testament, and that's Psalm 32:2, where it said, "Blessed is the man unto whom the Lord impute not iniquity." In other words, blessed is the man who does not have iniquity laid to his account or imputed to his account. Well, I thought everybody had sin imputed to his account, according to Calvinism. But this right here said, "Blessed is the man unto the Lord, unto whom the Lord imputeth not iniquity." But according to Calvinism, total depravity is the fact that Adam's sin was imputed to everybody from the very moment they were conceived in the womb. But yet there's somebody here that's being talked about who is called blessed, who is the man whom the Lord imputeth not iniquity. Who is it? Well, when we go on to look at that, we learn that the answer to this is whom the Lord imputeth not iniquity is the one in whose spirit is no guile. You see, choices were made. The one who does not have sin imputed or iniquity imputed to them are the ones whose spirit is in whom there is no guile. In other words, somebody who committed the sin did something about the sin that was that they had committed, and now they are in a relationship with God in which they are not guilty of that. So we reach the New Testament. Why would we think that the meaning of the word imputation would just suddenly change? Yes, there are times when an English word can refer to different things in the Old and New Testament, and even within the books themselves. We see that with the word works that we constantly point out to our Calvinistic friends in the book of Romans. But whenever we look at the word works in the book of Romans and even in the book of Galatians that Paul wrote, we know that the works being discussed there is primarily the works of the law. And we can see that in the actual books themselves by keeping those words in the context. But there's also other works that are discussed in the New Testament, and we see that in Paul's writings in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 3 and 2 Thessalonians 1 verse 11. And those are called works of faith. And so there's different types of works that are being discussed in the New Testament. We've talked about this before. And the same is something that is described by James as being necessary for a living faith instead of a dead faith in James 2:26 concerning works of Christ that are being, works of faith that are being discussed in those particular verses. But nowhere in the Scriptures do we read of two different kinds of imputation. One that is forced on someone, and then one that is done simply through choices made, like we have read about so far. There is no kind of imputation in the Bible that's talked about as being forced on someone. However, when we notice the usage of the word impute and other forms of the word mentioned in the New Testament, we see again only two Greek words translated as the words impute, imputeth, or imputed in the New Testament, similar to that of the Old Testament. The first of these Greek words is that called logozomahi, and Thayer defines that word as meaning to take an inventory or to give an account of. It's the same basic meaning as that in the Hebrew that we've read. The second Greek word is a logoho, and it means to put on one's account. Basically, it's the same meaning. There's no difference in the meaning of the word impute as used in the New Testament or the Old Testament. It always involves choices, and it is always something that is done by those choices as a result of choices, and not something that is forced on anyone. Now I ask you, just from these simple definitions, would you have any reason to believe that the meaning of the word imputation in the New Testament is any different than that of the Old? I think all of us would realize, just from looking at the definitions of these words that I've given, that there's no difference in the word imputation from the Old Testament to the New Testament. That is the importance of having Bible dictionaries whenever we study certain words. Whenever I go to do a study on any topic, I do it basically the same. I go into the Bible and I look up the word that I'm looking for to study, like the word imputed. I type that into my Bible software, and I type in different forms of the word that I'm looking for, like past tense, imputed, imputeth, different imputation, different things like that. And I look at the different times the word is used, and I see what Greek or Hebrew number is assigned to those. And that way I can group those scriptures based upon the exact same word that is being used, and I can look up the definitions to those exact words. It is just like I would do if I was reading a letter from anybody else that had written me a letter. If somebody had written me a letter who was a Jew, who was having legal problems out in the world, but I also knew that he was a Jew and he was talking about law, there's a chance that there would be two different types of law that he could be discussing. Him being a Jew, he could be discussing the law of Moses in some cases. Him having legal problems out in the world, he could be discussing the law as in the legal sense of the law in his local town or wherever he's having the legal problems. So I would have to go through his letter and look and see how he is using the word law. And I would have to do some study on that and see where he is using it. In other words, I'm going to keep those words in context, and I'm going to look to see how they're being used in that letter. And that's what we have to do whenever we're studying things like this. We have to keep words and phrases in proper context. Of course, we would know just from the definitions of these words that there's no difference in the meaning. So there we've caught up. We know that the definitions all match one another. So we know that when we start to read about these words, we know what the words mean wherever they're used. They mean exactly the same thing. And so, yesterday, my student, as I said earlier, had the nerve to tell me that whenever he gave definitions of words from creeds and confessions and stuff like that, that was no different than he and I just having a conversation about differences in religious opinion. He said the creeds and confessions are really no different than us just having a Bible study. In fact, this was what his reply was. He said creeds and confessions aren't any different than our discussion with respect to their nature. And my reply, of course, to that was that he should realize that all such creeds and confessions teach contrary doctrine. And teaching contrary doctrine is the reason these books were created, for the purpose of outlining what each respective group who wrote the books wanted to hold to and to teach people whom they wanted to follow after their own beliefs. Creeds and confessions and standard manuals and catechisms are all books that religious people write in order to get a following from other people. And they do that in order to outline what they believe, so other people can look at that and choose to believe that if they want to be part of that group or not. They're indoctrination books. They're books that are set up to be used as a law, as a rule of law, for those people who are teaching the things that they're teaching in these books. And that is why they're different than just having a Bible study with somebody. When I get up here and preach something or teach something to you, I'm not